Hey girlies, just a quick reminder before we dive into today's episode. The information shared on this podcast is intended to be general sports nutrition advice and education related to period recovery for female athletes. This is not specific to any one individual, and it may or may not apply to your situation. If you are looking for personalized guidance, be sure to apply to our RBSN Period Recovery Nutrition Coaching Program. Our 4-month period recovery program is designed to help you sustainably get your period back and keep it. You can apply now to get started in our program, and we'll leave the link for the program below. If you're not quite ready for that one-on-one approach, that's exactly why we created the Period Recovery Guide. It's designed to support the girlies working on period recovery, specifically if you've lost it due to hypothalamic amenorrhea. The full guide is coming soon, but you can download a free chapter right now to start your recovery journey. This is the Eat More Carbs Podcast. Hello and welcome back. This is the Eat More Carbs Podcast. It's Jenna here with Reilly. Today we have a special guest on, Megan Mahoney, to talk all about running the Boston Marathon. Boston Marathon is just a few days away. So when you listen to this, if you are running Boston, if you're running a marathon, this episode is for you.
We're so excited to hear all about kind of the Boston Marathon and all of the, special fueling that goes into the Boston Marathon. I remember first watching the Boston Marathon a couple of years ago, and I didn't really understand all the behind the scenes that goes into that race until recently. So if you're listening, you're going to probably be maybe just as mind blown as I was after listening to this episode.
I'm so excited for everybody to hear all of the tips that Megan shares today. Before we do that though, we are going to share our high and low. So just a little bit about our week, the good, and maybe the part we wish had gone a little bit differently. So Reilly, kick us off. What's your high and low?
If you listened to a couple of episodes ago, my low was that Fruit Riot was no longer at Costco, and I was very upset about it. They must have listened to the Eat More Carbs podcast because it has now arrived back at my Costco, and I am very excited. I did buy 3 bags because I was worried that it was going to go away, but you got to do what you got to do.
You got to stock up on your favorite products at Costco.
I feel like sometimes when you go to Costco and you find something good, you're not going to find it again.
Yeah, because it sells out.
It does. I know. It's very, very upsetting, but I'm very happy that it's back. Please don't go away.
I'm so happy for you. What about your low?
You're in Arizona, so you are free from the lovely blanket of yellow that is currently coating my house. We were in Arizona at the beginning of the month and we left. There was no leaves on our trees. There was nothing going on. I came back. The leaves are everywhere. It's beautiful. It's amazing. But my entire car is covered with yellow. My driveway is colored with yellow. There is clumps. I'm not exaggerating. There are clumps that look like dead animals all over the road of just yellow.
Okay, I saw a video. I think it was on Instagram. It was probably on TikTok first because that's how I see things. But it was that song Yellow. And it was everyone in North Carolina right now. And I thought of you because people were writing messages on their windshield. You're not exaggerating when you say it's a true blanket. Everything just is yellow.
It looks like it snowed, but it's yellow.
It's bananas.
It is bananas. And then it rains and you're like, oh, this is lovely. It's going to, wash it all away. But it just cakes it concrete everywhere. And I know it just is me complaining about the weather, and we all have I feel everywhere across the US has their, not so great parts. And I feel right now it's just a struggle because it's so nice out temperature wise. And then you go outside and you're just in a pollen cloud.
Not fun.
Not fun. How's Arizona though? How's your week going?
I'm so glad you asked about that because my low is also kind of weather related. And that is we are starting the triple digits this week. And for me in marathon training right now, finding time to run outside when it's light out so I feel safe and with it being in a temperature range that feels appropriate to run in is becoming more and more difficult as time goes on. Thankfully, I have just a few weeks before I run, so I won't have to do this a lot, but it's just so hard to run outside when it is that unbearably warm. It feels like a toaster oven outside. I don't know any other way to describe it.
I just remember when we lived in Las Vegas, which is a similar climate to Phoenix, you would walk outside and the warm air would hit you like you were opening an oven and you were expecting a cookie smell or some type of smell to hit you because you're I'm opening an oven right now, but you were actually just walking outside.
And it just doesn't stop. That's such a great way to kind of describe that feeling of it just kind of hits you in the face. My high, this is going to sound really backwards, but I promise it is my high. I saw somebody share a what I eat in a day on Instagram the other day. And I know that this is typically something we share on like the What Drives Us Bananas, and it's not something that we really appreciate content creators sharing because everybody is so different and so unique in what they need. I'm not going to share this person's specific information, but she is a runner and she shared her what I eat in a day, and it was so refreshing. She talked about how she made sure she fueled with plenty of carbohydrates because as a runner, she needs carbohydrates. She talked about how when she felt like she needed an extra snack, that she had one. She never shared specifics of portions on her plate, but she explained what she was eating and why. And then she made sure to include that she always has a snack after dinner because when she has practice early the next morning, she feels her best when she fuels with a PM snack. So it was such a refreshing what I eat in a day, and it felt so much more realistic to support performance than anything I've ever seen online. And it was so wonderful to hear her just like talk about how like it impacted her performance. And then she also like talked about how like it was things that she liked to include in her fueling. So it was the best what I've eaten a day I've ever seen.
I love that.
Speaking of fueling and what you might want to be eating in a day, we have Megan on the podcast today, and she is going to be sharing all about the Boston Marathon, fueling for marathons, fueling specifically leading up to the Boston Marathon, and kind of how that race works and how it's a little bit different from other marathons. So we hope you enjoyed today's episode. Megan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Hello.
We are so excited to talk with you today. Before we get into some of like the good running questions that we have to ask you, do you mind sharing just a little bit about like who you are?
Sure. I am also a dietitian and I work in private practice where I work with a lot of active people, including runners. And like I got here by way of, I guess when I was in grad school, my first job as a dietitian was a campus dietitian that I was doing in tandem with my graduate work. So I loved it because I was like, I can be a dietitian and not have to work in a hospital, and I can, help people with their fueling that actually want to come and talk to me. That was my first experience in working with active people that were, pretty healthy. It wasn't working with sick people necessarily, but helping them to see how nutrition impacts performance. And in that same realm, it was a lot of people struggling with their relationship with food. So maybe not on a sports team, but they were an active person who was really struggling with their fueling, mainly under fueling. After that, I've had a few different jobs, from working in private practice to corporate wellness, teaching nutrition and sports nutrition at the college level. I've really loved all of my jobs as a dietitian, which, brings me here. So now I work with clients one-on-one, but also I give a lot of team talks and group presentations, especially now I live in Massachusetts on the South Shore outside of Boston. So it's Boston Marathon season, and a lot of different charity teams and running clubs and groups are really ramping up for the race.
We're so excited to pick your brain actually about the Boston Marathon today because you are running it this year. I will never be fast enough to unfortunately run the race, but we are going to cheer you on and live through you vicariously. So we're really excited to chat with you today about it.
Thank you.
Well, we're so excited to chat with you today about it. The Boston Marathon is one of the, 7 majors now, which is weird to say. If you're listening and maybe you're not familiar with the Boston Marathon, Megan, maybe you could help kind of share a little bit about the race and a little bit about what's required to get in.
Sure. Yeah. So the Boston Marathon, there are essentially 3 different ways that you can get a bib to run the race. The first way that most people are familiar with is through qualifying in a different marathon. So the Boston Marathon qualifying times pretty much change every year, and then they kind of gaslight you because they're like, you need to run 3 hours and 25 minutes, but then they're like, well, you actually had to be 11 minutes faster than that if you actually wanted a number. So joke's on you. Good job with trying to qualify and actually qualifying, but you don't get a number. So first, you need to qualify with a buffer. I would say that is the first way to run the Boston Marathon, which is really unfortunate. Hopefully something changes in the future where if you qualify, you get a number if you want. The second way is through the charity program. So there's a lot of different charities that you can run with, from really large organizations and hospitals to smaller charities charities, especially in this area. Some charities, they might get like 3 numbers or 5 numbers. So it depends on who you know, I think, and like the different applications and how much money you're willing to fundraise. So for the larger charities, the fundraising goals are a lot higher than they were 5 years ago. So a lot of charities that you need to raise like $12,000 or more. So that's the second way, is applying to a charity. And then the third way would be an invitational entry. So that's pretty much for VIP people, like celebrities, or all of the like towns along the route. They get a certain number of bibs. So if you know the right person, you might be able to get a bib that way. So the race in itself, once you have acquired your number, is a point-to-point race. So it makes the morning logistics of race day a little bit challenging. There's that extra element of getting like 45 minutes to get to Hopkinton, which is the town where the Boston Marathon starts. And you take the bus from the Boston Common, which is downtown Boston. So it's about 45 minutes that you're on the bus. Somebody always makes a joke like, oh, this is a long bus ride and we have to run back. Like every single time I've been on that bus, somebody makes the joke. And then, you know, the only way back is by foot, unless you're hopping on the train. You know, it's notoriously a very hilly course. There's kind of like a caveat there. So the first half, if it was a half marathon, you would get a PR. It's mostly downhill and flat. And then the hard part about Boston is that there's 5, 6, 7 miles of hills towards the latter half of the race, starting around mile 16. So that's kind of the challenging element there, in addition to the weather, which is very unpredictable in Boston, where I've run it and it's been 75 degrees and I've run it and it's been 30 degrees, headwind, freezing rain. You can almost guarantee that it's not going to be a perfect weather day in my experience, but you know, anything is possible.
I know that we have so many questions about the logistics of running and timing and all of those things because Boston has so many components to it that we need to be mindful of. But before we get into some of those like Boston specific questions, can you just take a couple seconds and like explain to everyone like the importance of fueling a marathon and fueling Boston?
Yes. So fueling any marathon is going to be like imperative to not hitting the wall. We've all heard of the wall, and if you've properly fueled your long runs and races, maybe you've never hit the wall. But if you haven't properly fueled with your quick, simple, easy to digest carbs during your long runs, if you're out there longer than like 2 hours, you're going to hit that wall. So it is avoidable. So for any marathon, any run that's over 2.5 hours, you need 60 or more grams of carbs every single hour that you're out there. And if you practice with that, a lot of people can tolerate more. So we see elite runners that are out there running like 2 or 2.5 hours and they're getting 90 or more grams of carbs an hour. So what we know is that more is more when it comes to fueling with carbohydrates, but the limiting factor is going to be your gut and how well you can digest it and how much you've practiced it. And if you're somebody who has started dabbling in long runs or your marathon training and you've given up on fueling because your stomach hurts, your gut can be trained. I think it's really important to think of your gut as just another muscle that needs to be trained. Like you do your strength training, like you train your lungs and your heart. You also need to keep in mind that you need to train your gut. And like, look at the hot dog eating contests, right? Like not everybody can eat 75 hot dogs. They train for that. So you can get your 60 grams of carbs an hour during a long run, okay? So hopefully that helps to make you feel better that like it can be done. And another thing is that like gels aren't the only way to get carbs during a long run. And I think that that's something that so many runners are like, I just can't get past the taste. I can't get past the texture. Yeah, I'm with you, Reilly. Like I recently have just been getting such like the ick from gels. I'm so sick of it. Like where you can get through your long run with gels, but then you might get like towards the end, you have 1 or 2 left and you're like, the thought of 1 more, I'm just gonna like cut this run short. So there are other ways. I think that like the new hot thing that everybody's doing are Nerds gummy clusters. I'm not even joking, but there are so many different options for like chews that are like gummy candies with salt. There are so many options out there. I love the new guava watermelon ones. Like those are my new thing. They taste like a Sour Patch watermelon. I think that most people, if that's the type of candy that you like, is fine with getting a handful of those every couple of miles. So it just comes down to like what you're willing to fuel with, what you're willing to carry. Is it easy for you to tear open? Are you going to be taking it while you're running, or are you going to pull over to the side and stop for a little bit to take your fuel? Like those are all things that you want to consider when you're developing your own fueling plan and practicing on your long runs for half marathon or full marathon or any sort of race like that.
You've used the terminology a long run multiple times. So fueling during your long run. What would you classify as a long run? When do people need to start fueling, or when do they need to start practicing with their fuel during these long runs?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that a lot of the times people will get into these training blocks and they're like, oh, I'm only running 10 miles, so I don't need to fuel, or I'm only running this many miles, so I don't need to fuel. My personal guideline is like between 75 and 90 minutes. If your run is over that, then you need to fuel. But there's no run that's too short to fuel either. So if you're going out for like a 5-mile run and you don't need to eat anything in the middle of that, but maybe you didn't get your full breakfast, maybe you didn't get anything for breakfast, then yeah, you need to fuel during that run too. So I think that like there is no lowest number mileage, but I would say anything over like 75, 90 minutes, you would want to be making sure that you're getting some sort of carb in there.
I love that, because I think a big like myth that we see with the athletes that we work with, and a big misconception, is this idea that like if you fuel on too short of a run, it's a waste of carbohydrates, or I wasted my energy. Maybe you didn't need the carbohydrate during that run, but now you've like kickstarted your recovery. We have to stop thinking about like these fueling periods and like singular blocks. Like everything is connected when it comes to fueling your body.
Exactly. Like I really do believe that more is more when it comes to carbs, especially like surrounding that run. It's definitely not going to hurt at all.
I love this more is more. I think that is such a great approach to thinking about fueling your body and making sure you have enough carbohydrate to fuel your body when you are in the middle of marathon training. I've never heard it said that way before, and I love that.
Yeah, it's like we're in these constant blocks of training where like you have to do this again tomorrow, and you don't want to be operating in a deficit all the time, because it's so easy to get in a deficit because your needs are so high. So if you're not fueling up, refueling, hydrating, all of those things correctly, then it's really easy to get in a deficit where we see things down the line like injuries or stress fractures or just burnout and like mentally not able to get through the training.
You mentioned this a little bit earlier when you were actually talking about your pathway into the role that you do now, where you were talking about that you were working with active adults, but they didn't see themselves as athletes because they weren't on a team. And I think it's really interesting because a lot of individuals don't really associate themselves with being an athlete, but to run a sub 325 or a sub 315 or a sub 330, 345 marathon, to run a half marathon, and
Right.
You're an athlete. A lot of people don't think that they need to maybe do some of these other things when it comes to fueling or recovery because they don't see themselves as an athlete.
Right. They see themselves as a recreational gym goer that picked up running.
And it's still important to fuel no matter what you consider yourself as far as like an athlete.
For sure.
Can you share a little bit about like the specifics of Boston? I have so many questions because of like rumors that people share about the race, specifically like the bus ride there, staying in Athlete Village, and the later start times to this race. Like most of us are used to kind of showing up at the start line to a race and running pretty quickly after we get there, but that's not necessarily how Boston works. Can you like explain how that goes and then how you might approach fueling if you're running that race?
Yes. So like the morning, like I said, is really stressful for a lot of people because most people will stay in the city and take the bus out to Hopkinton. And the bus is usually about 2 hours before you start. So the start time for Boston is, if you are a qualified runner, depending on how fast you qualified, you're either starting the run at 10 o'clock, 10:30 or 10:50 or something like that, between 10 and 10:50. And then the charity runners start at 11:15. So that's pretty late for starting a marathon where, you know, when all's said and done, right, from the time that you start, you're not eating again, like outside of your gels, for 4, 5, 6, 7 hours. not even saying anything about how long it's going to take them to finish the marathon, but like when you get back to your hotel or Airbnb, you shower, you can actually get a meal. You're not eating again for a while. So what I recommend is that people get 2 breakfasts in the morning or 2 meals, having one like 4 hours before they start. So around 7:15, and then the next one around 9, between 9 and 9:30. Like how much is really going to depend on like your weight, your goals, but mostly what you've practiced with, because I don't want anybody like eating for the first time a bagel before their marathon when they've never had a bagel before a training run. So it really comes down to like what you've practiced with. But in terms of how much, usually what I'll recommend is like your body weight in carbs is what you want in the morning. So just split that in half and divvy it out between your first and your second meal. It can be a mixture of drinks, juice, and honey, and all those extra things that you can add to your food. But, you know, use foods that like you've had before prior to a long run. That's going to be your best bet for things to like digest and settle well. And then when you get to Athletes Village, you might need to eat your second breakfast on the bus. So that's something that you want to consider, is just the portability of whatever you're eating. I had somebody who was typically doing like some rice cakes. He was like, well, I don't think I'm going to want to eat rice cakes on the bus. And I was like, yeah, like I wouldn't really recommend. So instead he's having Eggo waffles with banana and honey and making that a sandwich and bringing it with him. And it's something that he's had. It wasn't his first choice, but like it makes sense to do something like that. Know thyself. That's what I always say. Know thyself, what you're willing to eat, what you're willing to bring with you. Get as many carbs in as humanly possible. And then when it comes to the hydration piece, I usually say stop drinking around like 60 or 90 minutes before you start, just because you don't want to be at like mile 2 and be like, oh no, I have to pee. So I usually say stop until like you're lining up, have a few sips, and then just utilize either the water stops or if you're carrying a handheld bottle.
Okay, I have a question about the water stops at the beginning, because I've heard that the start of the race is so crowded that it's sometimes hard to navigate those fueling stations. So is it better to bring your own water because hydration can be harder during those first couple of miles? Or have you found that when you've run, you're still able to get hydration from the aid stations?
Yeah, there is plenty of hydration for the runners. So the beginning of the race, you're right, it is so narrow. Like the towns of Hopkinton and Ashland are really small towns. It's a small little street that you're running in. So there's a lot of congestion, but there are so many stops on either side of the road. Water, endurance Gatorade, lemon lime flavor. So like if that's what you have practiced, then use that. But if you haven't practiced and you have a sensitive stomach, then, you know, maybe consider different options like carrying your own. But for the most part, people are usually like okay with using the water stops.
That's good to know, because I think that that's a fear for people for sure, is showing up to a race and not being able to get something from an aid station because a race is crowded. There are a lot of participants. And of course, everybody wants to run fast at Boston. What tips do you have for helping navigate such a difficult race from a fueling perspective?
Oh, it is so hard. Like I said, the first half, I don't want to say it's easy because it's still 13 miles, but the first half is relatively easy. So like you don't have these big scary climbs that you've all heard of, those Newton Hills. So you're not dealing with those obstacles yet. I say drink at every fueling stop for the water or the Gatorade. So, you know, making sure that you're getting, I usually say like at least one of those cups is probably 4 ounces depending on who pours it. So trying your best to get most of that at every stop, which is every mile starting at mile 2. So trying your best to get most of it, you're probably going to dump a little bit. So if people can get, you know, close to their sweat rate, that's usually good, which can also help to prevent digestive distress when you're out there. So we can sidebar that for later. And then when it comes to like later in the race with fueling, so I say like every 30 minutes, between 20 and 30 minutes, fuel. You want to fuel early on in the race because who knows what your stomach is going to feel like at mile 22. So fuel early and often in the race, just because you want to like consider that piece, which it's not ideal, but it could happen. And then when it comes to like fueling on the the hills and caffeine, which we can talk about caffeine in a second. But when you're fueling and the race is hilly, I usually say, look at what's ahead. If it's the time to take your gel in like a half a mile, but you see Heartbreak Hill, maybe take it at the bottom of the hill, like a little bit earlier than you need to, or take it on the downhill from the hills, because you're running up a hill, your heart rate is getting higher. If you're digging through your belt or you're digging through your pockets looking for your gels, you're tearing it open, like it's not easy to do. Your heart rate gets a little bit higher, you get a little bit like hotter and sweatier. It's just harder. So I say either take it a little bit early or take it on the downhills, so that way you're not making it a lot more stressful than you need to. And then when it comes to your fluids, I mentioned utilizing what's on the course, especially the waters, but you need a source of salt. So it's like probably more than you think. A lot of people who run Boston, they're like first time marathoners or first time Boston marathoners, and it's so exciting, but they don't consider like their carbs and their salt. They just think that like, oh, I'm drinking the water, I'm good. Like there are some really good products out there. If people don't want to carry a handheld, Salt Sticks has these salt pills, and they have 215 milligrams in a pill. So if they're utilizing gels or chews that have a little bit of salt in them, supplementing with like 2 salt pills every hour, then you're probably close to what you need if you're not willing to do a sweat test to actually figure out how much you need. So again, know thyself. Are you a salty sweater? Are you a heavy sweater? And try to figure out like, you know, if you lost a liter of fluid in an hour, then you need close to 1,000 milligrams of salt in an hour. So you just need to figure out how you're getting that salt. You're probably not going to hurt your performance by getting more salt, but you definitely do not want to undersalt. So that's really the only electrolyte that you need to think about, despite what like sports drinks marketing wants you to know. Think about your salt, and that's all I care about. And then what is going to be on the course for fuel is Morton. So Morton gels are hydrogels. They don't need to be taken with fluid like the other gels and sports fuel, like other options do. That's a positive if you do struggle with GI distress. They have more of a jello texture, like they're a lot thicker than some of the other gels. They're clear and they're an interesting texture. I'll just leave it at that. They're mildly sweet. So like if you're picky, you might actually like that better than like a chocolate goo. So it just, you know, it depends. You would want to have practiced it by now if you are running Boston, but you're going to see those right before mile 12, I think at 17 and a half, and then at 21 or 21 and a half. So you can't just utilize what is on the course. You need to make sure that even if you use Mortons and plan on using them on the course, you want to have enough to get to mile 11. I would even say like assume that they're not going to be there, and if they are, utilize them and take extra or whatever. But in case you drop something, like I just don't trust that there's like, just assume there's not enough, okay? But yeah, that's what's on the course. So you're getting 3 stops with gels, but that's it. You definitely need more gels in a marathon.
I think that's such a big thing, because a lot of times in a marathon, people will look at the course and then see what's offered and be like, oh, okay, that's plenty of fuel to help me get through. And in reality, we probably need so much more than what is offered, which is why some people end up hitting that wall, even if they have practiced with Morton before, and then they think that they're going to be fine with it. And then they're like, I don't understand why I hit the wall. And it's like, well, you only fueled 3 times and you've been running for 3.5 hours.
Exactly.
You mentioned caffeine a little bit.
Yes.
I feel like every race I run, I am next to somebody who has an energy drink in one hand and a gel in the other hand right before the race. How do we feel about that as somebody who is a runner themselves and as a dietitian who works with runners?
I'm just like not into the energy drink thing. Like it's just not something that I recommend, and it's something that I try to get people away from. It's a personal choice. I think that they're loaded with more than they need to be. However, like coffee can be helpful, or tea, or like regular sources of caffeine. It's going to peak about an hour after you take it. If you are a coffee drinker, then maybe you have your coffee like in Athletes Village, but then you get into like, am I gonna have to go to the bathroom at mile 2? So it's kind of like you have to make that decision for yourself. I personally just have my coffee in the morning. I am a coffee drinker, but then I'll utilize a caffeinated gel or 2 throughout the race. So keeping in mind when you're developing your fueling plan, 1, am I used to caffeine? Do I like the way that caffeine makes me feel? Because if not, then the benefits do not outweigh the risks of GI distress, feeling jittery, feeling anxious, your heart rate increasing. But it can also help your performance a little bit. It can make the efforts feel slightly easier. So if you tolerate it well, then it can help you. But more isn't more when it comes to caffeine. I usually tell runners to limit it to 1 or 2 gels for a marathon. So think about where you need that extra push, where you need that extra mental clarity at least. So an hour before you reach the Newton Hills is where I would recommend definitely placing one of them, and then figuring out like, would I want to add one again towards like maybe once I get to Boston College or a little bit before that, which is like the top of Heartbreak Hill, to help you keep you going towards the end. So just kind of playing around with where you might insert those. I think that that's a better strategy than like chugging an energy drink before you start. You might agree.
I do agree. I actually think it's really interesting because the energy drinks, I feel like, are just pure caffeine.
Yeah.
And a lot of runners, like myself included, like as a person, I have the nervous peas, right? Like I have like a little bit of a pre-performance anxiety.
Yeah.
So all of my liquids before, like I really want them to have like at least multiple fueling focuses. So it's like electrolytes and carbs and like, you know, how am I getting in multiple things within this beverage? And I think sometimes with an energy drink, it's just like pure caffeine, no calories, no carbs.
Exactly.
And I feel like it can make it worse.
I can't think of anything worse. You're right. Like, we should be able to kill multiple birds with one stone when it comes to our fueling, especially like morning runners where you're rushing out the door. Like, if I'm only willing to drink something, can it be a high carb beverage that also has some salt? And then it's like, check, check, check.
Everything is so purposeful, I feel like, when you're a runner and you have that like very detailed or very time restrictive situation in order to make it like work the best way possible. Like, how can we like use this in every way?
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Megan. We have a couple ending questions for you. This is Eat More Carbs Podcast.
Love it.
What is your favorite carbohydrate?
Oh, easy. Pasta. Best carb, hands down. Death row.
What type of pasta?
I'm a rigatoni girl. I'm a very simple gal. So like a bowl of rigatoni, butter, salt, Parmesan.
It cannot be beat. It cannot be beat.
Cannot be beat.
What is your favorite like pre-workout or pre-run fuel?
Oh, okay. So if it's a shorter run, I'll do something like a banana or like an applesauce, just something quick. But for a long run, I love Pop-Tarts.
Do you have a favorite Pop-Tart?
Oh, I just do like the raspberry or strawberry. Like, I just do the fruit ones. What about you?
I like the Trader Joe's knockoff Pop-Tarts.
Love it.
That are like the pomegranate flavor, I think is what it is. I don't know. It's pink.
Yeah, mine's pink too. It just looks like jelly.
Yes.
I do like the brown. I don't know why, but like I'm a brown sugar or like cookies and cream person. Like I can't do the fruity flavors. Like that's why I struggle with gels, I think, a lot of the time too, because I don't like that like gel jam thing. Even though I like jelly and jam, I just can't. I don't know. I can't do the fruity ones. So I'm like a brown sugar person.
No, that's fair. I mean, you could just like crumple that up and take it on a long run.
I know. I did try the Nerd gummies recently, and I am somebody likes the gummy bear, but I don't know if I can chew the Nerds gummies. I think I might choke on those.
Yeah, they are like very like there's the crunch and then the like sticky.
The chewing and the running for me, I can't do it. I'm like, I can't keep moving my feet and chew at the same time. I'm like,
In the wintertime, I know that you live in sunny Arizona, but like in the wintertime, if you have pockets, it's a lot easier than in the summer when you're just wearing like a tank top and shorts. It's harder, like, where am I pulling these gummies out of?
what is your favorite way to carry fuel during a marathon? Because Reilly and I are always looking for recommendations for deep pockets and shorts or running belts or things like that. So what is your way or favorite way of carrying fuel during a race?
Oh my gosh. So I actually just got new shorts because I thought that like every runner was wearing Tracksmith. Like I thought that Tracksmith was the running outfit. So I ran a half marathon a couple months ago. Everyone's in Bandit. So I ordered some clothes naturally, and the shorts, they have 4 pockets in the back for your gels. So I practiced with those. And so I really like that. I've never carried my fuel in just my clothes before. That's like my new way. But if you're not wearing Bandit or any other brand that has the pockets, I have a flip belt. It carries my phone and like I just shove everything in there. it's so unflattering, I will say, at the beginning of a marathon when you just have this big belt around you, like it's heavy. So it's encouraging to fuel because you want to get rid of some of it. So I would say that those would be my two ways. But wintertime, you got a coat on, shove them in your pockets. It's a lot easier to just grab.
I can honestly say I don't remember the last time I ran in a coat. So
Oh, Jenna, I'm so jealous.
I know. But I also run in 100 degrees sometimes. So, it's the trade-offs we take sometimes.
Yeah, it's true.
Megan, what is your favorite post-workout fuel or post-run fuel?
Definitely a smoothie. Like that is my go-to after, because again, you can kill multiple birds with one stone, and then I can ease into my breakfast. So I'm a morning runner, but I know that if I can get my smoothie that has bananas and berries and almond butter and whole milk, sometimes protein powder, and my creatine, I can get all of the nutrients that I need and buy me some time before I want to like sit down and have a bowl of oatmeal or whatever.
I love that. Liquid energy for the win. Megan, what is your favorite pair of kicks? They can be running shoes. They don't have to be running shoes.
Oh, well, for running, I always wear Asics GT 2000. That's what they're called. They're trainers. They have support for flat feet, which I have. So I also recently got the Nike Alpha Flies, but I haven't worn them. So I'm not going to race in them because I just haven't had time to like practice in them. So I think I'll like them. They fit really well.
I love it. Megan, this has been so great. You have shared so many fueling tips, not only for Boston, but for runners and runners running any type of race. I think it's so important that any runner listen to this episode. But if someone has more questions for you about running Boston, how can they find you? How can they reach out to you?
Yeah, find me on social media at Nutrition for Runners. So I should be pretty easy to find. That's my handle, and you can message me, you can email me, but anything that you need to know should be right there.
We're going to leave Megan's information in the podcast show notes so that way you can easily find her and reach out to her. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Eat More Carbs podcast. Megan, thank you so much for being on this episode. Please make sure you rate, subscribe, and review. And as always, remember to eat more carbs.